Hi, my name is Lori Grow. I'm a co-owner of Shoreside Therapies. Today we have Kristen Holmes with us, and we are talking about stress in the body and our window of tolerance. So, welcome, Kristen.
Hi, it's so good to be here and to talk with you about this. I'm really excited.
Yes, I am too. I am too. I'm interested in learning more about it. This is not my specialty, so I'm really excited to hear more. So, do you want to tell us a little bit about just the basics of stress in the body and how it affects us and go from there?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really good place to start. Something that I talk with a lot of clients about is stress. I think when people are calling and they're wanting to come in for therapy, the majority of clients that are coming in are identifying, I'm experiencing a lot of stress, whether
Mhm.
that's typical work stress, life stress, kids, spouse, partner. Maybe there's an adjustment or a big transition. I feel like right now in the beginning of the school year when we're recording this,
Yeah.
there is a lot of stress and anxiety around just the transition for kids back to school and or the transition from everybody kind of coming out of our amazing summer that we have here in Wisconsin into
Yeah.
the fall, the sudden, weather change and things like that. And so one thing that I have found really helpful when working with clients is talking about the impact of stress on our body because
Mhm.
more than likely we're experiencing physiological symptoms that we're just kind of writing out to, oh, well, I'm stressed, right? Or, oh, well, this is
Yeah.
happening. And we end up silencing those cues, is what
Right.
ends up
Right.
happening. So I
Mhm.
have found recently, I've been kind of obsessed. I am obsessed with the brain just in general. I
Yeah.
think the brain is so amazing. I know that that's so cliche and so basic to say that, but the brain is so powerful. And we oftentimes forget that the brain is the central nervous system, right? It's the
Right.
CEO, it's the core of our body. And guess what? Stress really has an impact on our brain, which impacts our
Yeah.
body, right? And so I think the more information that we have about our mental and emotional health and looking at it in the scope of whole health, like the whole body, then the easier it is to learn how to manage, but also address some of the underlying things that
Mhm.
are going on with stress and in our body. And
Yeah.
that can be anything from, you know, high anxiety, depression, PTSD. It could be anything, right, that is presenting.
Yeah.
It's how we're managing that stress that
Right.
determines what our coping skills, what our coping strategies look like.
Yeah, and I think you're right on point when you say that it's usually that we dismiss it. Like, "Oh, I'm feeling stressed. Okay, that's just normal. I'm stressed all the time." Right? And I do hear that a lot. I'm sure you do too of like, I'm
Mhm.
just in this constant state of stress. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
and it
that's not a
becomes
place we need to be.
yeah, and it becomes
Yeah.
normal. It's kind of like when you
Mhm.
start working with like a nutritionist where you're working with, your coach at the gym and you're trying to get your body back in shape.
Mhm.
And one of the things that a nutritionist will talk to you about or a health coach will talk to you about is biofeedback, right? What is our
Mhm.
body telling us and or not telling us because we've ignored it for so long. And I think with stress, it's the same thing. There comes a point where we
Yeah.
just start living as though it's normal or this is just something that just is, right? It just is what
Mhm.
it is. That we're not realizing that it's actually affecting our ability to function, but also our ability for our body to run correctly and efficiently.
Right. Right, right. We just as humans, we just become used to things, right? Like, same with sleep deprivation. Most people don't know that they're actually sleep deprived, and turns out, yeah, that's where you're at. You just have been doing it so long, you don't even notice it anymore, which can be pretty scary.
Yeah, and one of the things I'm glad that you brought that up because that's a great segue into talking about one of the components of how stress affects body is the first thing I ask clients. There's a series of like 3 or 4 questions that I always ask when we start any initial
Mhm.
session. It doesn't matter whether you're coming in with stress as the presenting problem or not. I always get a feel for where you're at in dealing with stress and what it looks like in your life, because that is something that's important in our goals, right?
Mhm.
And so, one of the ways to know that stress that is bothering someone, or that it's at a high level that's difficult for us to sustain at that level and maintain, is our sleep, right?
Yeah.
It's not only how long we're sleeping or how we're sleeping, it's also in our sleep cycle. Are we reaching a state of REM? Are we reaching that state of deep
Mhm.
sleep? Once again, going back to the brain, we're starting to learn a lot more about the brain because of technology and advances in science and medicine. And when you look at brain scans, if you're someone that struggles with anxiety or depression or stress, those areas in your brain are constantly lit. They never turn off. And we
Mm.
also know that if there's a lot of stress around relationships or problem solving, issues at work, issues at home, a lot of women, we are constantly maintaining all of these different roles and schedules, depending on if we're a parent or not. Our brain, those areas in our brain that are responsible for that social, emotional, like problem solving, those areas are working too.
Mm.
So not only are we dealing with these parts in our brain that are specifically for maintaining stress and anxiety, right? And
Yeah.
experiencing insomnia or difficulty sleeping, racing thoughts, waking up multiple times a night, waking in the morning and not feeling like you got a good night's sleep, even if you got 8 hours, right? Or 9 hours.
Mhm.
Those are indications that our stress is probably what we would consider clinically significant, right? Like there's
Yeah.
something going
Yeah.
on where you're trying to maintain that stress, your body and your brain is trying to process that stress and manage that stress when you're sleeping.
Yeah. Yeah. That idea is so important, that if you are getting 8 hours of sleep or 9 hours of sleep, because a lot of times people do need more like 9. I need about 9. I don't get that, but I really think I do need that. But if you are getting 8 to 9 hours of sleep and still feeling exhausted, that is time to go seek out some professional help. It might be going to your primary care, start with a therapist, doing something about it is really important, because that is a pretty clear signal that something might not be going right with the
Yeah.
system. Yeah.
Yeah. I think another signal too, and kind of in line with nighttime, is when the sun starts to set, when it starts to get dimmer throughout the day and the sun is starting to, go down, our brain starts releasing our sleep chemicals, right? Melatonin.
Mhm.
And if you're feeling revved up or restless at night, or you find yourself hungry, like a lot of us end up kind of nighttime snacking because we're not eating throughout the day, right? Those are indications. That's biofeedback. That's your body saying,
Mm.
"Oh, we're not done. Like there's something we got to do." Which I think is once again common in our adult life, because one thing that we've
Yeah.
seen here after COVID is an increase in remote jobs, right? And a
Mhm.
lot of my
Mhm.
clients that I work with, especially young adults, young professionals, people who are graduating from college or their graduate program, they're working 40 to 60-hour weeks because they're working
Yeah.
remote. And so a lot
Yeah.
of people are actually working at the time when their body should be starting to feel their sleep cycle come on, right? So that's another indication of
Mhm.
not being able to stop work, feeling like you can't just, close your laptop or walk away from your office. If you're having issues with those boundaries, then that's another reason or another indication that your stress is not being managed well and you're also not
Right.
sustaining. right? We're starting to
Right.
experience burnout and exhaustion.
Yeah. Yeah. And that is so common. I'm hearing that pretty often as well, of just, especially working from home. Like the idea of it's wonderful and it can be really wonderful, but it is a little bit harder to have those boundaries, those mental boundaries, because you can work at any time you want. That's not always the best, depending on like how you navigate stress and work. It's not always the best thing to have that available at all times.
Well, and we have a
Yeah.
mini computer, in front of
Yeah.
us
Yeah.
all the time.
Yeah.
And I bet you a lot of people watching this probably have their work email accessible on their phone, whether it's you have a specific app
Mhm.
that's downloading, notifications and emails. You have Slack. That's another thing that's really popular right now,
Mhm.
are these like group networking with Slack, Google Desktop, things like that, where you're constantly getting notifications. Or even if you have your
Yeah.
notifications turned off, you're picking up your cell phone and opening up your email just out of habit,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
seeing,
It can be
oh
a habit.
crap,
Mhm.
it's 8:30 at night and I got an email after work hours and I need to deal with that. Well, no,
Yeah.
you don't need to deal with that right
Yeah.
now, right? But we're in this society where everything is so
Yeah.
accessible that that is impacting our ability to manage and cope as well.
Yeah. Kristen, as you said that, I was thinking, we could just have you on a loop, you saying that. No, you don't have to deal with that right now. Anytime you'd open your
Yeah.
email after 8:30, it's just your voice saying, "No, you don't
Nope.
have to deal with that."
Turn that off.
Yep.
Turn that off. Don't
Yeah.
you wish
You're
don't
so
you wish like Siri could do that for you
I
or Alexa could do
do.
that
I
for you?
do. It would be so nice. It would be so nice because it does feel like that in the moment because it's there and you see it and that's the natural next step. Oh,
Yeah.
here's the thing I have to do, so I have to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I want to hear a bit about the window of tolerance.
Yes. Oh,
Yeah.
we were just talking about this before the call, and
Yeah.
I'm actually really excited to share about the window of tolerance. So, I'm a trauma therapist. That is my niche. I
Mhm.
do trauma and attachment work, and I work with kids all the way up through adults. I work with couples that are experiencing, a lot of the things that we experience in our life are connected to that underlying something that's,
Mhm.
difficult or upsetting, or something that's there, like a pain or a wound that we need to handle, right? And so,
Yeah.
with that, one of the things that we talk about very frequently is the window of tolerance. And so, as a trauma therapist, I've been talking about the window of tolerance, and we'll get more into that in a minute, with clients for as long as I've been practicing, right? As long as I've been
Yeah.
trained and experienced and working with trauma clients, clients coming in with PTSD, adjustment, things like that happening. Yes, I talk about the window of tolerance. What's happening right now that I'm really noticing is clients coming in and they're saying, I feel like I am extremely stressed. I'm irritated, I'm irritable, I'm agitated, I can't focus, I can't do this or that. I'm having a hard time like with emotion regulation. I feel like it's just like I can get angry and 0 to 100 at the drop of a coin. But then I also have these times where I don't want to do anything and I'm completely shut down. And so previously, I had been talking about
Mhm.
anxiety and depression, as a mood disorder, right? Very
Yeah.
seldom do you have a mood disorder where you have, just one thing going on. I think that's the really interesting thing about the job, the work that we do, is that very seldom do you just fall under one thing, right? So
Right.
where there's
Right.
anxiety, there's probably depression. So when
Yeah.
I talk to clients about that, and I'm also assessing in sessions what's going on with them, they're like, well, I don't really feel this, or I don't really feel like those symptoms, right, that we talk about that are
Mhm.
textbook diagnosis. But when I pull up the window of tolerance and I show them this idea of hyper arousal and hypo arousal, and our ability, like where we stay on that window of
Mhm.
tolerance, clients are usually like, oh my gosh, you just described
Yeah.
what I'm experiencing. And so that's why I thought it was so important to have a
Yeah.
conversation virtually and to do this interview, because I feel like a lot of us might be experiencing something very similar. And it's helpful to know and normalize, like, oh,
Yeah.
that's happening to me too. And those are kind of the light bulb moments that
Yes.
my clients have. Like, I thought I was losing it, but like you're
Right.
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 Like, or I thought I
Right.
was lazy, right? So when we're looking at the window of tolerance, I want you to think of like an actual window, right? So
Yeah.
actually, I love pictures and metaphors in my head. And so you're picturing an actual window, and I want you to kind of break it into thirds. So you have the bottom third, the middle third, the top third, right? In the
Mhm.
middle third, you have what's called our window of tolerance, right? This is where we're experiencing normal sized feelings, right? The way that I explain it is these things, they come and they go, right? Feelings
Yeah.
are fluid. They're not wrong. They're not right. They are temporary, right? They
Mhm.
change. You can feel one thing one minute, you can feel another thing another minute, you can feel multiple things, right? And so in that middle third, you're experiencing the normal size feelings, right? Where
Yeah.
you feel, anxious, and then you do what it is that you need to do, and then that anxiety subsides, right? It's
Mhm.
very manageable at that. And I
Yeah.
want to be very careful with how I say that, because a lot of clients come in and they're in that upper third and they're like, oh, this is manageable. No, this
Right.
is
Right.
that's we've learned that. We've
Yes.
learned to operate
Yes.
at that. But I want you to think of, you're really, it's easy for you to maintain, you're getting good sleep, your mood is good, like your mood is stable. You might have some up and down, you might feel, intense big emotions, but you're able to regulate fairly easy,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
When we look at the top third, that's where I want to talk about hyper arousal. So,
Mm.
hyper arousal is where we frequently see our stress state, right? That is high stress, right?
Yes.
That
Yes.
is fixation, hyperfixation. That is nervousness. That is difficulty. You can also experience difficulty concentrating. You can experience that agitation, that irritability that we were talking about. It's also where you might experience like that's where you tend to be. If you're dealing with trauma, you might be activated, right? So
Mhm.
you might
Mhm.
feel, when we're talking about the body, in the body you might feel your heart rate raising, right, rising. You might feel your chest is tight, your throat is tight, your stomach hurts, you might feel nauseous, you might feel dizzy, your head might hurt, you might feel like you're flushed, right? So that's that
Yeah.
hyper aroused state. That state is actually okay, because that is related to our safety center. It's related to that
Mhm.
instinct that we have of flight, fight, freeze, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
you get into a car, you slam on your brakes to avoid a car accident, and you're like, oh my gosh, right?
Whew. Yeah.
That's that state, right? So then a hypoaroused state, which is the bottom third, is you just don't feel like doing anything, right? You're
Mhm.
tired, you're experiencing exhaustion, fatigue. You might be experiencing bouts of sadness or indifference. Numb is another one that we use
Yeah.
too, like just feeling like disconnected, dissociated, like you can't really relate to people, or you're having a hard time connecting with what you're doing. You're definitely not in the present in this aspect. When we're
Yeah.
talking about mindfulness, you might be ruminating on things in the past, right? Really stuck on failure. There's poor, self-esteem, that kind of stuff going on. Your typical like low energy, burnout, depression
Yeah.
symptoms, right?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
that is the window of tolerance. We
Yeah.
want to be somewhere within that second, that middle, right? Where
Yes.
we're experiencing these emotions and these feelings. We're feeling hyper aroused, but we're not at this level where we just can't function, right? The
Mhm.
same thing with hypo aroused. We don't see that shutdown when we're having it. We might see like, like this feeling of like, oh, I need to rest, or like that was a lot or something like that, the exhaustion. But once again, like you're not staying down there.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
you want to be able to regulate, right? That's that emotional
Right.
regulation that we talk about. And so that's just kind of a really good picture of it. What I always do
Yes.
in my
Yeah.
sessions is I have like a handout that I pull up on my iPad and I just sit it in front of them. So if you think you might be experiencing this difficulties with window of tolerance, then
Yeah.
I would just Google window of tolerance image and I would pull it
Yeah.
up and see where you fall, right? Because that's a
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
good picture of what's going
Yeah.
on.
Right, and to just have it so I mean, you really made it clear of, like, where somebody might be on the day-to-day, but when something happens that would get somebody aroused into that stress state, that they're in this top
Mhm.
state, and that's great and needed and part of the human condition, but then there is gonna always be that drop from that, right? Am I
Yeah.
getting that right? Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. And
yeah,
it's your parasympathetic nervous system working, right? If
yeah.
we're talking about the brain, it's doing its job. But
Mhm.
what we have to also think about is even though it's doing its job, when your brain is, when you are aroused, you can't stay in that state forever. Your brain, your body,
Yeah,
eventually the adrenaline, the cortisol, all of the things that are going off and being released in your body, they eventually kind of stop to release, right? So if you're experiencing this high aroused state and it's lasting longer than 45 minutes to an hour, depending on what that
mhm.
looks like as far as your activation looks like, right? And that's an indication that, okay, there's something going on here. This would be a really good time to reach out to a therapist.
Yes, yes,
The other part
yes.
is that when your brain when it comes down, it has to recover. Your brain has to rest. So that what you start to see is that hypoarousal start happening, right?
Mm,
And that's
mhm,
where you might have had a rough day at work and you need to watch your favorite reality TV show, right?
mhm.
I mean, it's just kind of like you need to disconnect for a little bit,
Yes,
right?
yes, yeah.
When you're staying in that, that is where we see depression happening, right?
Yeah,
And that's where
makes
we
so
see
much
that,
sense.
yeah, that chronic stuff that's happening, right? Your body is you
Mhm,
are having a hard time coping with those bigger feelings,
yeah,
right? And
yeah,
so that has an impact on your body and you can
yeah,
feel it physically. So a lot of the work that I do with clients is body work, body awareness. Okay. What is something okay, I see that
yeah,
you're getting upset or is there something happening? What are you feeling in your body right now? Tell me what
yeah,
it feels
yeah.
like to be Lori right now.
Mhm,
Help me
mhm.
understand what that feels like so that we can connect with that feeling so that we can do some work around what's actually happening in our body right now.
Yeah, yeah. So it sounds like though that the way to move through it is first off figuring out where that's coming from. What part of your body? Where is it? What am I experiencing? So the client is kind of figuring out that piece. Is
Yeah.
there a next step? Is there something after that? Or is that something that is so individualized you have to be in a session to be able
Yeah.
to, yeah,
Usually the next step is feeling it
yeah.
because we don't usually want to feel it, right? If we tend to be kind of high strung, like
Mhm,
go, go, go,
mhm.
go, go, that hypoarousal does not feel good. So
Right,
usually we try to
right,
do something to get out of it, right? That's
right.
where
Yep.
that's where like coping and like self-soothing
Mhm.
comes into play, Whereas I always talk about like you're needing self-care. What self-care is not
Mhm.
is grabbing a pint of Ben and Jerry's and sitting in front of the TV and just eating the Ben and Jerry's, right? That might be helpful in the moment. It might feel good,
Yeah, and
but to
super good.
actually,
Yeah.
yeah, and it's delicious, right? But to
Yeah,
actually work on managing and work on that window of tolerance, that dysregulation, we have to do work around that. So
yeah.
once we kind of walk through the experience of feeling it in our session,
Mhm.
then we kind of start, that's where it becomes kind of individualized, right?
Yeah, yep,
We
makes
start
a
kind
lot
of
of
talking
sense.
about, okay, you're feeling this. What is
Mhm.
going on that's causing that feeling, right?
Yes.
What is
Yep.
underneath that? And that's where therapy is, I think, so helpful and so beneficial for a lot
Yes.
of people
Yes.
because now we're going, okay, I'm feeling this in my body. I'm connecting with this feeling. Now I'm going to work with this therapist on let's see what's underneath that, right?
Right,
And
right,
you're learning emotional regulation skills and coping strategies and things while we're in the session. So it does take work. It is a muscle that you have to grow and build so that you can learn how to do that. A lot of the times we just want to like tell me how to fix it.
right,
Tell me how to fix it.
right,
How do I not feel like this anymore? Right?
right,
But
right.
that's where the work comes in, right? That's where the
Yes.
therapeutic
Yeah.
process comes in, is kind of navigating what that
Yeah.
looks like.
Yeah. Yep. You're so right. That has to be that individual person because everybody's obviously different and they've been through different things and their bodies respond differently. So that piece of that individual work and the practice is essential. So,
Yeah.
Kristen, thank you so much for coming.
You're welcome.
And if anyone out there would like to schedule with Kristen, you can go ahead and go on our site at shoresightherapies.com and you can set something up with her. All
Absolutely. I
right.
am taking new clients, adults and teenagers. I'm not so much working with children right now, but that doesn't mean that
Mhm.
if your child is experiencing these feelings that you can't reach out because we can talk about maybe my availability might fit, but definitely
Okay.
just reach out. I love that we schedule those free consultations. And so that's a
Yes.
really good place to start is that if you go to the website and you go into my bio, go ahead and schedule that 15-minute phone consult, and we can talk about some of the things that you're experiencing. I'd love to work with you.
Awesome. Awesome. Thanks, Kristen. We'll talk
Thanks,
soon.
Lori. Have a great day.
You too. Bye.